Man, this was a very inhuman cliffhanger, right? But the good news is, it's the next day, and as you can see here, our part A of X-Tol has completely dissolved. So I would say it's time to solve the mystery and put part B in. But before we start, any guesses on which color it will turn this time? Are you done, Mr. X-Tol? I'm gonna put you in some bottles now. Am I drinking something that looks like developer gone bad? Maybe. Today, I'm gonna develop 2 rolls of film. And here we have some Ilford Delta 3200. This film is long expired, I think for around 10 years. And with Ilford Delta 3200 you should usually rate this film at around 1600 anyway. And there is a rule of thumb that for every 10 years expired you should add 1 stop of light. So instead of 1600 I exposed these rolls at 800 ISO. And I plan to develop them normally at 3200. And here I have the massive dev developing chart where you can look up development times for film and developer combinations. When I use X-Tol, I do usually not use the stock solution to develop, but I use a 1+1 dilution, which means for every part of developer I will add 1 part of water. For Ilford Delta 3200 at 1+1 dilution it will take me 18 minutes to develop. I might even push it a slightly tiny little bit, so maybe instead of 18 minutes I will develop the film for 19 or even 20 minutes, just to be sure. A little note from future me after I developed the film. So what just happened is that I found the package of the film and it's not 10 years expired, but 19 years expired, which means that I could have easily overexposed or overprocessed it even more. But I guess that's life, and I think the results came out quite reasonable anyway. Over and out. Okay, what do we have here? Here we do have my Patterson developing tank, which fits 2 rolls. And here we have this film retriever thingy, so I can retrieve the beginning of the film and start rolling it up in daylight, changing back. Yeah, that's basically it. Scissors, of course. This here is always a bit tricky. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You will just put it in like this, retrieve, and here you go. Here it is. Let's try number 2. Yes, good. I think this never happens to me. I always need like 2 or 3 tries until I make it. I will quickly open up my developer tank, and it's very important to always have the foot of the stand of the rolls in here, because otherwise it's not light tight. I figured out that it's a bit easier if you don't cut it straight, but if you cut like a flat little curve like this, because then the film will not get stuck in your reels. And it's also important to not cut through those perforation holes, but cut between, so it's easier to load. And when you have one of those spools in your hand, you should put your thumbs on these little edges. It's very easy if you can start like this in daylight, but if it's complete dark, it can get a little bit harder. And number 2. You know, it will look like this, that I will just reel one side of it, try to retrieve the film more and more, and in the end cut it when it's completely spooled up on this spool. I will put all of the things that I need in my changing bag now. In here. These changing bags get really sweaty, like, oh lord. Okay, so I can feel film number 1.
"12 seconds later. 3 weeks later.
Ta-da! Here's the tank. Roll number 1, roll number 2, scissors. Let's put some chemicals in. Trick question. What happens if the place you're usually developing film in is not clean? AKA my darkroom is a mess. I didn't clean it, and the result is that we're in the kitchen today to develop some film. Safety disclaimer first, if you develop film in a place where you mess around with food as well, you have to be super careful to not drop any of the chemicals on places where you will touch food later on, and make sure to wipe every surface down later on. To be even more clean and careful, I do always use rubber gloves when developing film. During these times currently, these might be worth a fortune because everybody is looking for gloves, but chemicals, you know, are the real deal. You have to be careful with these as well. I do always pre-wash my film, so I will just put 20-degree warm water into the tank and rotate it for a couple of times just to get the film adjusted to water and to the temperature, and then we can start with the developing. And remember that I said that my X-Tol that I had in my darkroom was yellow. I don't know what happened, but it's not anymore, so I thought before I use the batch that I just mixed up, I will give it a go anyway and see if the older one is still good. We're gonna mix up the chemicals first. And for 2 rolls of 35mm film, we will need 600ml of each. And I made the mark on my cup things because they are not very precise. So we will need 300ml of water and 300ml of X-Tol. The stop bath is optional, so you do not really need it. You can also stop the development by just pouring clear water in, but I prefer using stop because then it's more efficient to stop the development process. And with my stop we will need 30ml of stop and 570ml of water. So I will pour 2 times 15 in here. 1 time. And another time. And that's it for the fix. I already pre-mixed some fix a couple of weeks ago, and with the fix you can reuse it a couple of times, I think around 10 to 15 rolls, so this should still be good. And I will just fill 600ml in here. So developer, stop and fix. So I will use a timer on my phone, and as I said before, I will develop the roll for around 19 minutes, 1 minute more than the recommended 18 minutes, just to be sure. I will invert the film the first minute continuously, and then I will let it sit for a minute, then do 4 inversions, let it sit for a minute, 4 inversions, until the time is up. And I would say, let's start. Always do a slight tap to get the air bubbles out of the tank. And now we will have to wait for a minute. One last rinse with distilled water. One drop of Autoflow. That's enough. Give it a good rinse. Couple of seconds. Let's see if we have something on here. Okay. Yeah, good. I mean, you can see that the base fog is quite dominant. You know, usually the edges are transparent, but here it's almost gray. The negatives are alright. Like regarding the base fog, they will probably not be good enough for darkroom printing, but I think scanning should do quite fine. So just let it dry and then we'll see. So the films have dried, I got them sleeved and I got them scanned. So now is the time to show you the grainy, gritty results that I got out of this 19-year expired films. But wait, before we start, one little thing, because I just want to say that the next adventure is right around the corner.